IDS Talks is a podcast dedicated to helping corporations and law firms find new and effective ways to leverage data, giving them a decisive advantage both in and out of the courtroom.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of IDS Talks. My name is Jonathan Sachs, Chief Revenue Officer at IDS, and I'm joined today by Bobby Williams, a director here at IDS. We're going to talk about the journey to becoming a digital forensics expert. Bobby, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, good sir. Thank you for having me. I watch you do these podcasts with, our other team members so frequently, and I just get jealous that I'm not included. So, now I don't have to feel that way.
No, well, look, we can do a whole Bobby Williams series. This could, and we'll take it on the road. I mean, this could be a thing, and if we did, Bobby, I'd be honored. So, I've got I'm wearing a little gold today in my polo. It's a University of Colorado Boulder. I'm trying to support Travis Hunter and his Heisman Trophy campaign. Fantastic college football player. I have a fantastic teammate on here who isn't in the running for an award, but just got one. So, Bobby, before I ask you all these questions about the road to being a digital forensics expert, why don't you just go ahead and share with the listeners what happened last week?
Last week was just I think a really good, humbling week for me. It started with my birthday on Monday, December 2nd, but I had been nominated for a Gail O'Connor Spirit Award to be the 2024 honoree of that award. And turns out I am a co-honoree, myself and another industry colleague. We're both honored. Gail O'Connor was a person who was in every way her most authentic self and used that to live her life out loud and help people, even when it didn't get any fanfare, even when it was behind the scenes. She was so helpful and so inspiring and so invigorating for so many people. And that award honors people who the committee feels and the popular vote feel embody that legacy. So It was very humbling. I was very surprised, especially when you see some of the other names on the list.
We were, I speak on behalf of all of the company. We were all very proud of you. I personally was very proud of you. I think it was much deserved. And the reason I raise it is not to toot Bobby Williams' horn and, make you feel more special, though you are very special. But I think that award recognizes something in you that's probably played a role in your career growth and path. And so to the extent we work that into today's conversation, great. But again, that was super cool. I had the pleasure of watching it live, and even just the emotion of your acceptance speech, I think caught a lot of people, wanting to shed a tear.
Many people don't know I'm a crier, so it's a surprise to many people when they learn that about me, that I'm a crier.
So to our listeners, if you're not a current subscriber, you should definitely sign up if I do this series with Bobby. The challenge will be, can I make him cry? Love it. Okay.
All you got to do is give me an award every time we do the podcast, and I'll cry every time.
Come on. All right. So let's start, and let's start from the ground up. The Bobby Williams story. Could you walk us through your journey from a life in eDiscovery to being a consultant to ultimately being a director at IDS?
Very interesting. I think a lot of people in what I call my generation of eDiscovery came into this field the same way, meaning that we all came in different ways. Like there was not a set path when I came into eDiscovery. So many people were in law school and, learned a little bit about this like technological infrastructure that supports the law and decided to go down that path. Or so they became like the earliest iteration of eDiscovery attorneys. Many people were working as paralegals and started getting into like early review platforms like Concordance and stuff and how to support that. Many people started like just scanning documents and digitizing them and understanding that there were systems to put these documents into databases. And then you have people like me who got an undergrad degree in graphic design and had no idea that I would end up anywhere near the legal industry at all. And but had an opportunity because I formed a relationship with somebody who was a vice president of a data management company. And because we hit it off, and I think we just had a connection. He put me in contact with somebody who was willing to give me an interview. And
Okay.
this was 24 years ago that this happened. And he even
Bobby
told
was
me,
8. Bobby was 8 at the time, in case you want. Go ahead. 24 years ago.
he told me, he said, look, this person is going to take your call. They're going to give you an interview, but I'm not going to have them give you any special treatment. So if there's going to be a position for you in the organization, you're going to have to still earn it and meet all of the criteria. The only favor they're doing for me is taking the call and giving you the interview. And I made that call. After doing freelance design for a bit, after getting my graphic design degree, realized that I really didn't like designing for other people because as an artist, you create something, and then when you create it for a client, they want you to change it. And it was like, oh
Sure.
no, this is my baby. You want me to change my baby? So I had said, let me start exploring technology. And even though I was getting a degree in graphic design, I had been teaching myself technology. I had started working with computers, taking them apart, putting them back together. I researched, and we had old computers in my graphic design lab that were out of warranty. I started researching how can we make them faster, build more capacity in them. So I had some technological background, but it was self-taught. And then I made this phone call. Interview went really great. Started working for a document management company, and then that started me in the eDiscovery field.
Mm.
Um, and that was on the government side. That was a contractor for Department of Justice. And then I left that organization after a really good few years and learning a lot. I got into trial presentation work and then left that organization and went to work directly for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Eastern District of Virginia. Um, a lot of great experience there because I was wearing so many hats. I was their web developer and their webmaster. Simultaneously, I was doing user support. I was doing server administration. I was still doing lit support and e-trial work for them. And all of this was happening simultaneously. And they started to put me over their internal technical training program. I started going down to the National Advocacy Center in South Carolina and started to teach the attorneys there about technology and other government employees. And it was during that time that I really started to engage with what I've always had, which is like this love of teaching. I left there and went to work for Lockheed Martin. And then while I was at Lockheed Martin, that's when I started to get involved in digital forensics. And I spent a couple of years learning some of the basics of chain of custody and data collections and image verification, and then got an opportunity to come work at IDS, which at the time was a very young organization. And the rest, as you say, is history. 11 years later, I'm still at IDS.
Yeah, no, that is so appreciate that walking through Bobby's progression. Progression's not even the right word. It's just the yellow brick road of sorts that you took to get here. So let's talk a bit. I mean, I got so many questions, but let's focus on where you just ended your statement, which is brought you to IDS.
Mhm.
And so what I'd like you to just share a little bit is you came into IDS and clearly it was not, hey, thank you, IDS, I'm a director. No, it was growth within here. So now we understand the move from designer, which, hey, I think you need to work on a you need to work on an IDS Talks podcast shirt or something. We have a logo, but maybe we can figure something out. I won't mess with your baby. But let's talk about how you enter, the position you started in at IDS, how you advanced within IDS to where you are today, before I go down the other paths of questions.
So I think the how I advanced was I just focused on learning as much as I could, and really I focused on good relationships within the company, because there were people in the organization who played a role in me learning, right? I was willing to learn, but I didn't know everything I needed to learn. I didn't know what I didn't know, right? But I was open to learn. So I started at IDS as a base level consultant. And because of people being willing to spend time with me, mentor me, teach me, give me opportunities to do things that I hadn't done before I came to IDS. People like Julian Ackert, who I think is a great example of what you can achieve with focus and being driven by the mission, but still being open to teaching people. Julian's pretty good at that. So early on, it was Julian. I had another colleague, James Whitehead, at the time in the organization. I worked a lot with Neil Lawson, who was in the organization, had some early projects with our CEO, Dan Regard, back then. And I just got opportunities to learn working on projects. And then with excelling at that came promotions from a base level consultant to a senior consultant, from a senior consultant to a managing consultant, from a managing consultant to a senior managing consultant. And it was around that time where I met you and expressed an interest in maybe taking a foray into revenue generation, which I had never done with any intention in my career. And thank goodness you were here, because you were like, hey, once a week, we're going to set up a meeting cadence. We're going to see what you need to learn. And I'm going to teach you what I can. And that's when I started learning about conceptual selling and all of these sales theories. And you started introducing me into some of the protocols that help you sell, and some of the things I could expect as a relationship builder. And I think that was the journey. It was just I was always at some point in time connected to people at IDS who I think were invested in my success. And I was willing to work and collaborate with those people to help improve myself and prepare me for the next step.
Now, for those, Bobby, who might be in a similar situation in their jobs today, did you seek these individuals out and ask them to teach you, or for mentorship? Did they present themselves to you as willing to do it? Was a combination of the two?
I think it was a combination of the two. It was a lot of me seeking, because that's my personality. But I also think that people were always receptive anytime I sought them out. And I also think, look, I have to be honest about the fact that there really was no path to what I did at IDS, which is start as a base level director and be a base level consultant and become a director. So part of it was, we had leaders in the company who founded this organization already at a certain level when they founded the company. Right. So, and they had never run a company where they had to bring somebody from a base level consultant up to a director. So, how do you do that? How does one do that when you've never done it before? So it was a bit of a collaborative effort of me seeking out and them figuring out, how do we work together to make this happen, and them, you being included in that, obviously.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed those. I enjoyed those early years together, Bobby. Not
It was
11
a
years
simpler
ago.
time.
I've got 6 coming up here, but I think this is a really important point. And I think this is a point that people live, I think, in their everyday life. If you don't ask, you're not going to get. What's the worst that happens? Somebody says no.
Yeah.
But it's like you need to advocate for yourself. If you have an interest, you need to pursue it. You need to ask. That's on you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people might want to get the tap on the shoulder and say, Bobby, you're really good at this. Let's go down this path. That happens, but I don't know about you, Bobby. I'm a strong believer of there's no harm in asking.
I think there's fear associated with it. And I think, look, it's a difficult mentality to overcome for people who professionally have been told for a lot of their careers to not take up space. But then to be
Mm.
in an environment where you can really benefit from taking up some space, right? IDS is a place for that. IDS is a place where you're going to get an opportunity to take up space, to take initiative, to do something, to, ask questions and ask for someone to help you and for someone to support you. And IDS needs that because everybody is so, focused on the mission that we may not always execute the tap on the shoulder, right? So, but I do think that there's the conundrum is that that's just a tough mentality to overcome when a
That's
lot
true.
of people have been trained to just keep their heads down and not take up space. So
Yeah.
I think, we got to try to find that balance of like, how do we change the mentality and create an environment where people feel more secure raising their hand and asking for help and taking up more space? um yeah, that's a loose thought that I have on it.
No, I don't disagree. I would add on that saying that sometimes people need to be encouraged to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Um, and when they hear stories like yours and they hear comments like we've just shared, maybe that helps them.
Yeah.
So I've got a human element question I want to ask, which I'm not going to ask. I want to bounce back to the technical first. It's going to be like playing Pong, Bobby. You weren't born in time to remember it. I do. A little box plugged into my TV with a little knob paddle going up and down. It's going to be like Pong. Cuz you talked about in your path the um tech side, learning tech, and we're not just talking software and programs, we're talking actual hardware. So I want to focus on that. I want to talk about staying ahead of the curve.
Mm.
Um, and so I'd like, if you don't mind, and you don't because you're on the podcast and you have no choice, could you share your experiences in terms of staying updated on latest trends and techniques in digital forensics? Because it's got to be changing so frequently.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one method of staying ahead of it is that it's required. So we
You have
have
no choice. You have no
certification.
choice. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Like if you have a certification, you got to maintain that certification. It used to be you get a certification and you just had that certification for the rest of your life, like a degree. That's not the case anymore. Now you get a certification, you have to renew that certification depending on which one it is, every 2, 3, 4 years. With that comes new learning, new information. So you have to stay ahead of from a knowledge perspective, just to maintain your credentials. But also when you're in the field, you encounter new technology and there are new methods to mitigate and deal with and handle that new technology. So you need to practice and learn how to do it. But I think another thing that generations coming up after us do this organically because they grow up in technology. It is just natural for them to engage new technological systems. And for our generation and generations that come before, that doesn't happen so organically. So we need to be intentionally curious about technology. I'll give you an example. Um, since the smartphone renaissance, I've been an Android user. I've been an avid Android loyalist, right? But then the only time I would come into contact with iOS devices would be when I did an investigation or a collection, right?
Right.
And it finally dawned on me that I'm not going to be as ahead of the curve as I could be if I only engage iOS devices when I need to for work. So I got an
Wow.
iPad. not because I wanted to be a part of the iOS ecosystem, but I wanted to start getting my brain used to how a user engages with that operating system, how a user uses those apps. What is the process like to install updates on it, and testing new programs and apps on it to see how they work and start to understand like where data might be saved. That gave me insights into how a user might use an iOS device,
Right.
which I think empathy makes you a better investigator, thinking about someone else's experience.
Back to the human side. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just an example of like my personal curiosity about technology helps keep me ahead of the curve. And I think it helps a lot of people do that if they're just intentionally curious about
Right. Come to the dark side, Bobby.
it.
Come to the world of Apple and Mac. Come on. It's not so bad.
I love Android so much.
I get it. I'm not one of those guys. I'm a Apple guy locked into the ecosystem. Okay. So, like I said, Pong, let's go to the human side because you talked a bit about it and you respectfully said our generation and the younger generation. So I appreciate that. Thanks. I might not look my age. But even for someone like me who's somewhat tech savvy, not to the same level as you, there are things that go on with tech and in the world of digital forensics that I'm not going to understand. And so there's got to be a human element to this. And so can you share your experiences interpreting complex data and associated tech stuff and presenting findings in a clear and concise manner to somebody who may not be as well versed? I'm not
Yeah.
talking like someone who can't reset the clock on their VCR. Young people look that up. But hopefully you get the sense of what I'm talking about. You know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. It's your everyday.
Yeah.
How do you make it so that someone who's not in it every day understands?
So I have made it, and this is not just a data and technology thing. This is a communication and human interaction thing. I have tried to onboard the skill of taking complex ideas and simplifying them and making them more digestible for people. I try to do that in many different ways. Analogies is one way to do it, right? And we've seen that in writing and literature, as long as we've been reading, right? Drawing an analogy, using something that someone does understand to help teach them about something that they don't understand can help bridge the gap, right? So that's one thing. But also understanding that people are just super receptive to storytelling, and understanding that when we're looking at data and technology, there's a story in that data. And a big part of that story is not just what the technology did, what happened with the data. It is, what did people do? Does this data and the technology tell us about the activities, ideas, thoughts, and communications of people, right? So I try to focus on like understanding what happened with data so that I can tell people the story of what happened. I'm not trying to make them technological experts, right? Because everybody's not going to be a technological. Even the attorneys that I work with, the goal is not to make them technological experts. The goal is to make them technologically competent, right? But I'm really trying to get people to just understand what happened. And to do that, I need to be able to connect with them, use analogy, use metaphor when I need to, but just make sure I'm making the story what happened as clear as I can possibly make it.
Yeah, Bobby, I think that's a really important point. Lawyers today aren't required to be tech savvy, but they do need to know about technology. They do need to understand data. They need to understand what the data is saying, which is why I think, and hopefully you would agree, it's so important for these lawyers to have a company like IDS as part of their team, so that that's the role we play. Give them the understanding, but if you need to tap someone in to explain it to a judge,
Yeah.
it's us. It's
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Like I have a client who next week I'm going to do, and this is an in-house client. This is not a law firm. This is a end client that we do work for. Sometimes we do work
Corporate
for.
client, for those who may
Yeah,
not understand what
corporate
Bobby's
client.
saying.
Yeah, corporate client. And she reached out and was like, "Hey, I really just want my HR people and my IT people and the other members of my legal team to have some understanding of more digital forensics basics so that we can start to build our strategy in collaboration with me for the information governance and readiness side of when they have internal investigations, when they need to do collections, right? So uh, I'm not going to make them all technological experts. Some of them already are. The IT team is part of that, but digital forensics is a specialization. And so it's helpful for me to be able to have conversations with them to say, okay, these are the types of cases that you might need to deal with. These are the type of investigations you might need to deal with. And this is how the way you handle data can potentially have an impact on your ability to understand the story of what happened. Right. And that's me being embedded with them. That's me having a relationship with in-house legal so that they knew they could reach out to me to just ask me to take some time to help teach their team members so that they're better prepared when they need it. You got to have the partnership, you got to have relationships, and that's people. That's just all about people.
It is. It is, Bobby. All right. So I want to close out with this last question, and it involves people. It involves mentoring. I know that is so important to you. It's something also that it's important to me. I'd like you to close out by talking to us and sharing advice that you would give to aspiring digital forensics professionals.
Be curious. That would be the first thing. Technology is changing rapidly. It's growing rapidly. The usage of it is ever increasing. And the only way you're going to have any hope of staying connected and staying ahead of it and continuously augmenting your expertise is to be curious. You got to be asking yourself questions. You got to be asking other people questions. The second thing I would say is be empathetic. Care about the experiences that other people are having, because as a digital forensics investigator, you need to try to dig into how something happened and why something happened and what someone may or may not have done and what their motivations may have been and how that impacted their engagement with technology and data. So legitimately care about the experiences of other people. It will help you be a better digital forensics investigator. And then relationships, like just know that you're not alone. I'm a big anime fan. And one thing you learn when you watch a lot of anime is that friendship is really powerful. There are a lot of people who want to teach, who want to mentor, who want to help you uh, find your path, and they want to increase the pipeline of talented people coming into our industry because we need it. We need smart, dedicated, hungry people who want to come in and help us understand data and its impact on people. These systems are made by us and for us. So I think understanding that puts you on the right pathway with the right mentality to learn what you need to learn to be effective in digital forensics.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I appreciate that insight, Bobby. Well, listen, I want to thank you, Bobby, for joining me today. I'd also like to thank our regular subscribers and those that may be first-time listeners for spending time with us. If you'd like to learn more about IDS or want to subscribe to our IDS Talks podcast, you can visit idsinc.com or go wherever you normally get your podcasts from. If you happen to be watching this in video format on YouTube, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to talking more about data with you on our next edition of IDS Talks.